Good? Good. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's keynote to start the information security track of the conference this year. I was pleased to be invited by Bill to give a brief talk on some stuff I've been thinking about and working on, and that is Internet of Things. So a little bit about me. My name is Mark Boltz Robinson. I am the Foundstone Education Team Lead for the Foundstone practice within McAfee, formerly Intel Security, formerly McAfee, formerly Network Associates, yada, yada, yada. We're now the new McAfee, and I still work for them. I'm also a senior consultant. I've been doing information technology as a whole for over 25 years now. I've been doing information security for the better part of the 20 of those years, specifically focused on information security. I am also a co-founder and was a co-director of Security B-Sides DC in Washington, which is now one of the largest B-Sides in the world after Las Vegas. You can find me on Twitter at SageFedora, hence the hat. And you can also follow the Foundstone team at Foundstone. I've spoken at a variety of events in the past, including presentations for local chapters of the FBI InfraGard, as well as Secure West Virginia HackerCon last year. Semi-regular speaker on the Reboot It podcast with Bill. Generally, I spend my days either working on developing training materials or helping instructors better their teaching so that they can teach information security topics. We do anything from really low-level security awareness training for people who don't know much about anything other than that they reboot their computer anytime anything bad happens to it, all the way up to attacking and defending firmware and SCADA ICS systems. So we run the whole gamut of skill levels in everything that we do and the course offerings that we have. And when I'm not doing that, I am a craft beer fan. I am also involved as much as I can be in the information security in general, and I spend a lot of time playing with my Hack 5 gear. Still waiting to get my Bash Bunny. So that's kind of how I spend my time. Today's talk, I titled it, "The Attack is Coming from Inside the Refrigerator." And we're going to talk about that because the world of digital forensics and incident response, or DFIR, is about to get much, much more complicated. So we're going to look at some of the considerations involving that and the Internet of Things, the role that these devices can play within attacks, as well as either being the attacker or the attackee or target. And also related to this, I noted that there is a digital forensics track, 2 p.m. today. There's also a talk on digital forensics in the home and the investigation of Internet of Things. So we're going to talk about the traditional view of incident response, such that we even have traditions in this field at this point. We're going to also talk about the things that are hiding in plain sight, discuss some of the challenges and considerations for these devices as they relate to incident response and digital forensics. I always like to start and involve every presentation I do with some ground rules. I think that this is especially germane to this particular topic today. If you look at how Internet of Things is being discussed in the media today, within our industry today, at conferences today, everybody talks about the deplorable state of the security of Internet of Things, and gee golly, when are we finally going to make the Internet of Things secure? Which comes immediately to my first point: there is no such thing as a secure system. So, never has been, never will be. I don't care how much effort you put into it. Anybody with enough time motivation, and money, we'll figure out how to hack it. So we have to start with that realization. Now, the Internet of Things is particularly problematic for security because they always fall into rule number 2, which is that anything that can be insecure will be, despite your best efforts to keep it from the contrary. How many times have you ever seen in any organization where they have their web-based user interface for their switches or their routers, and they enabled it to make sure that, oh, you must use HTTPS, but when you investigate it or audit it, you find out that, sure enough, the HTTP option is actually still enabled, because at some point they had an issue with the switch, they had to reload the configuration from a backup, or something else happened, the switch rebooted, there was a bug, whatever it was, and the switch ended up defaulting to its original state, which was insecure. Right? So, the third tenet is that everybody wants everything cheap and easy except for security people. We're the only ones that actually want security. Nobody else really cares. Except maybe for the now former CEO of Yahoo, who got severely dinged both personally and as a company due to their colossally bad security breach last year. So, but in the consumer space and the IoT space especially, these things need to be cheap. They need to be inexpensive. And that means both on the sensor side of Internet of Things as well as devices. So we always go for that. Security is always, as usual, an afterthought. I've been doing this, like I said, for over 25 years. Security was an afterthought over 25 years ago. Still is today. So IoT manufacturers are even less experienced at this than the most inexperienced among us, and probably even in your organizations. So what is IoT anyway? Well, there's no one specific clear definition yet, but in thinking through it, I decided it could probably be best summarized as devices that could even be seemingly ordinary or traditional things that are uniquely identifiable, addressable, and contactable via a network. Some kind of network medium that participate in machine-to-machine or machine-sensor or sensor-to-sensor communications. So they don't just talk and interact with a human being, they interact quite autonomously with each other and with their corresponding sensors that may assist them in what they do. So there are a lot of definitions. I think Cisco's involves that it has to be connected to the internet, and that is often the case. However, I felt that was a little too limiting because there are cases where these things can be just on a network that is perhaps air-gapped, such as that's even a thing anymore. And so they may not be necessarily exposed on the internet itself. So I wanted to make that distinction. So that's my definition. Now, Forbes had an article recently in which they talked about the Internet of Things, and they talked about where things are headed. And in their article, they had this chart, which is from TechRadar's Internet of Security Q1 2017 kind of market, where we're at with things. And it's typical of like some of Gartner's like hype cycle, Magic Quadrant type stuff. But if you look at all the different components that they talk about in Internet security, the Internet of Things, what is noticeably missing from any of this? They don't specifically call out the security. They talk about network security. We're getting there a little bit. Device security, not so much so. They do have a variety of security methods, but any kind of like, we're going to be secure anytime soon isn't on there. There is not going to be a moment today, tomorrow, this year, next year, the year after that, where we'll ever say IoT devices are now secure, our job's done, we can go home. So just keep that in mind. So looking at it from an incident response point of view, often we talk about incident response in the NIST framework. It's one of the most common baselines for incident response. And the process we go through as incident responders doing DFIR work. We have our various preparation leading up to the incident. We have the detection and the analysis of what triggered the incident, whatever that might be. We look at the containment, eradication, and recovery of whatever it was that affected the systems. And then we go into post-incident activity, the kind of post-mortem type stuff. What happened? How do we fix it? How do we make it better? Etc. Right? Everybody's kind of familiar with that? So, I don't know about you guys, any of you that do incident response, but for me, most of the times, the incident response strategy in customers looks a little bit more like this. They have some preparation, and then there's a mass amount of panic. They don't know what to do, and that's one of the reasons why they usually end up calling somebody like Foundstone. When we, as responders, then go in, we typically want to triage the machines and collect all the artifacts related to the investigation of what happened, right? And one of the most common ways to do that is to follow what's called the order of volatility. You're probably all familiar with that. It's RFC 3227. And the RFC outlines the process by which, it's a guideline really, for the things you should collect and the order in which you should collect them. So we're going to want to get the memory dump of the live memory of the running system. We want to collect any caches as well, things that are squirreled away, for example, in the /tmp directory. We want to get all the different kinds of tables to show what the system was doing at that moment in time. That means ARP tables, routing tables, kernel states, all that kind of stuff. Open files, which processes are touching which open files, etc. Process lists, and so on. Then we want to get the disk, temp file systems, and then the disk images, and then remote data and logs, physical configuration and topology, and any kind of archival media that system touched, right? You're all like totally familiar with this and good. You're probably wondering, well, what does this have to do with anything? I'll get there. So we also typically work with standard tools. We have write blockers. We have forensic imaging software that can be either a commercial tool like Encase or FTK, the free FTK Imager, or Autopsy, which is the open source kind of equivalent of those. And if you want to do an incident that you may think ends up as a criminal investigation or even a civil complaint, you're going to want to have chain of custody, which means you're going to want to have evidence that is admissible in a court of law, which means you're going to want to use a commercial tool like Encase because it's accepted already as a proven methodology for acquiring the data. We can also use tools like Volatility, which helps us analyze the memory dumps that we get. And then we'll probably have in your toolkit, you'll have your favorite tools for PDF file analysis and Visual Basic and decoding binaries, whether it's WinDebug or OllyDebug or whatever the case might be. You've got your bag of tricks, right, for the different operating systems. Probably mostly Windows. Does anybody have like tools that they use for Linux systems if they do incident response? Anybody? How about Mac OS? No? Okay. Maybe if you're lucky you have a sandbox that could be either Cuckoo or a commercial product these days. And so what do we go after? What do we look at when we deal with an incident? We look at the obvious, right? We're going to go for the laptops and workstations and maybe the servers that are running Windows of some form. Probably a version that's much older than it really should be at this point. See in healthcare a lot, even to this day, we're at Windows 10. The base operating system for most healthcare in terms of the medical systems is actually still Windows XP. ATMs are catching up. ATMs are now being deployed with an updated Windows 7 image to replace the previous image that they used to use. So that's where we are in terms of that. But we have these systems. It's very typically Windows in most organizations when we're looking at commercial businesses and government. We will sometimes see in the field Mac OS or Linux. And then on the server side, we typically have Windows servers, sometimes Linux. And actually in most organizations these days, I see at least a few Linux systems or Linux-based appliances. And then occasionally Unix. Still occasionally deal with customers that have mainframes, although usually the mainframe's never involved in the incident. If there was any one system that arguably was closest to actually being a secure system, it would be the mainframes from IBM. And then often, these days, that one server is actually running maybe up to 80 or 90 virtual machines. So everybody's doing virtualization these days. And we get into cloud too, but we'll avoid that topic for today because that's a whole other ball of wax. So we go in and we image our stuff. Virtual machines are also fairly easy to image. And Case and the other commercial products, pretty much all the imaging software to capture the artifacts on a system fully support VMDK files, for example. So you don't need to actually even get into the virtual machine itself. You can just grab the VMDK file that represents that virtual machine on the hypervisor, and that in and of itself can be parsed to understand what happened with the virtual machine. So we go in and we collect all these things and we think we're done. It's a happy world. We've got all this stuff. Life is simple. It's as simple as the diagram on the left in this chart. Because all IT architecture is super simple, right? It's three-tiered. We have a perimeter. We have a web services in one DMZ. We have an application middleware component. We have back-end databases. And then we have all our users on the local network, and that's it, right? No, it's never like that, right? In reality, life is far more complicated. It generally tends to be that an organization's network and architecture looks a lot more like the stuff on the right. It's a mess. And in every single time I visited any client in the last 5 years at least, the Visio diagrams are at least 2 years old and out of date. They have 6 other networks that nobody knew about. They have systems that nobody knew about that run application protocols on ports and protocols that nobody knows about, or few people understand how they interact, and so on. So now your job as an incident responder is even more complicated because you've just collected all the stuff on those things. But as the news has shown with things like the Mirai botnet, it's definitely not that easy. We have the not so obvious. Home routers, Wi-Fi access points, whether it's a commercial access point from Cisco or a home access point, doesn't really matter. The point is that we also have these devices. You may think, well, what does that have to do with anything? It has a lot to do with everything these days. ISE researchers, who are the ones behind this so hopelessly broken Capture the Flag contest project, which has been run at DEF CON, at B-Sides DC, and a number of other places, have been doing a lot of research into the critical vulnerabilities of routers, commonly used in residential environments, but I often see that these things also exist in corporate environments. One of the most recent clients I worked with actually had, the IT team had DSL lines and a couple of like regular, cable modem connections on their network that were used as an alternative for testing their systems from the outside, meaning on the internet. And they'd go out through the cable modem or the DSL line to test things rather than going out through their own corporate firewalls and coming back in. In the tests that ISE has done in their research, all 13 routers that they studied had critical exploitations. They could completely take over the router from the local network. At least 4 of those could be taken over without management action. You did not have to be any kind of admin or have any kind of administrator credentials in any way, shape, or form to completely own the router. Out of those, 11 of the 13 were also compromised over the WAN, meaning over the internet. Anybody anywhere in the world could easily own these machines. And they are, in the end, devices that are running some kind of operating system, which means they can be used, if not in and of themselves have any kind of interesting data, although they're routers, right? So we can route the data or copy of the data to us if we wanted to grab the data. But even if we don't want that, we can use these devices to attack other people. And that's one of the things we have to keep in mind with the dangers of IoT. A good portion of these types of devices also tend to have a NAS option, network attached storage. And so network attached storage means we have the entire vault of all the data accessible as well. But what if we look at the even less obvious? How many of you would ever think that you would ever have to do DFIR work on a gaming console, for example? How long is it before the Nintendo Switch is now a new option for you at Pony Express to have all your hacker tools on it? I think that would be pretty cool, actually. I hope they're working on that. But point being that these are still devices. They have storage, they have CPU, they have network, they have an operating system. They can be involved in these things. And there was a number of older gaming consoles. I think it was the older Xbox was actually one of the devices that was listed for the Mirai botnet as one of the attacking systems. How about DVRs? Would you ever think to investigate a DVR? So you have boxes like the Xfinity box, the X1. That's basically a PC, folks. That's not even a DVR at this point. It's a PC with a decent sized hard drive to record your shows. TiVos. TiVos are basically Linux machines. To this day, they're using Linux. And to do the TiVo app, like if you have an iPad, I do this actually, I have a TiVo. And I like the TiVo because I have my iPad and I can actually download shows from the TiVo that it's recorded for me, and I can download them to the iPad and take them with me when I'm on the road, which is great as a road warrior. But that's done through an HTTP interface. Notice I did not say HTTPS. The interface on the TiVo, although they do have HTTPS as well, is also just HTTP. There are a number of websites that have information on how you can hack your TiVo to get full access to the operating system so that you can SSH into it and use it as a regular computer. Would you think as an incident responder to do forensic acquisition on a TiVo? But we couldn't have enough with just putting Internet of Things as things like DVRs, gaming consoles, and things that we'd put on a network, because networks allow us to do updates and gaming with friends and things like that. No. We had to put the Internet of Things directly in the TV. And there is already a case for this where there was a user who had their LG television compromised with the cyber police ransomware. Their parents had somehow downloaded an app. It's undetermined whether they downloaded it via the actual Play Store or whether they got it some other means, but somehow they got an app on their television so that they could watch a movie, and halfway through the movie, the image on the right appeared, demanding ransom. Sorry. So that's a case for an actual real-world example of the Internet of Things actually being exploited. And that's with an LG TV. Now Ars Technica just recently had an article, it was just a couple days ago, where they actually talked about some research that's been done on the Samsung TVs. And Samsung, across the board, has an operating system called Tizen, or Tizen. I'm thinking it's Tizen, because it's probably an Asian pronunciation. So they have this operating system widely based on Android, but they fully customized it. And the research pointed out that they had so much wrong with this thing. They said it was so amateurish the way they've done any kind of security, if they've done security at all. For example, there is liberal use of the C function string copy. Any of you had any kind of like application programming classes or secure programming classes? Anybody actually do C as opposed to like Java? String copy has long since been considered one of the most dangerous functions you can use in the C programming language. It is so horribly poorly written and broken that nobody uses it. Any programmer that knows anything about programming in C, even from what little I know about C, knows that you use other functions rather than string copy. These guys use it all over the place. Not just once or twice, but it's all over the code of the Samsung version of this operating system. They do SSL that transmits half the stuff in clear text anyway. What's the point of that, right? So then we look a little further. These two little gadgets may look a little unfamiliar to you because you're used to seeing them in their packaging. These are the Amazon Echo and the Echo Dot. The Echo Dot's on the left, the Echo's board is on the right. These are from an iFixit teardown of both devices. Have you ever considered what it takes to do forensic imaging or incident response if you have to deal with one of these suckers? There's no ports on these things. I have one of each at home. I wasn't willing to take my own apart, so I found the teardowns from iFixit instead because I didn't want to rip mine apart. But it turns out that there's a lot of glue holding these things together. They gave the Dot one of the worst ratings in terms of its ability to be taken apart. But each of these, if you look at the components that are highlighted, they've got storage. The one uses a SanDisk 4 gig NAND flash memory. And the other uses 4 gig high performance eMMC flash memory. So there's storage on these things. It holds data. It has an operating system. So how would you, following the order of volatility, if this thing was part of a Mirai botnet, for example, and was set up in the conference room of a company, how would you get the data off of it? What about other smart stuff? This is the Ikea Trad free gateway. they come up with these bizarre, nonsensical Scandinavian words for their stuff, of course. Guy took one of these apart. There's a CPU. There's 32 megs of storage. It may not seem like a lot these days. This thing talks the Zigbee protocol, which is known to be fairly easy to hack or exploit. And you get a whole nice little sock on a chip. So we have the smart stuff in general, not just the Ikea, but we've got, of course, Philips Hue, Wemos, which are also marketed under the Belkin brand for smart outlets. We've got T something. Sorry, I forgot the name. It eludes me right now. Another manufacturer of the cheaper version of the light bulbs that are like the Philips Hue. And so on. So we've got all these other things now that are on the network. So I don't know how many of you have seen it, but when I mentioned Zigbee in the previous slide, one of the reasons why I was mentioning that is that there were some researchers over in Europe who found out that they could take the Philips Hue lights and without even having access to the hub, without having access to that, even though Philips has actually done a bunch of things smart in terms of their security. They've done certificate pinning. They've done trust establishment and trusted connections with certificates and all this other stuff that supposedly any light bulb attached to a hub is supposed to only trust that hub and the other lights that are in that little network. They found out that that was easily exploitable, and they could rewrite the operating system on the light bulb and then have that light bulb attack every other light bulb, and they only had to be within 400 meters of the first light bulb to do this. And so they have a really cool video online where you can watch that they then take a drone that's flying in a park across the street from this building, and they play with every light in the building, making them turn on and off and different colors and, you know, moving in time to various like heavy metal music or whatnot, and it's like really interesting. So what do we do as incident responders, as companies and universities and other organizations and government all start using these smart light bulbs? Because smart light bulbs are cool. I like telling Alexa to turn the lights on and off. Much easier than getting up and going over to the actual switch. I like having the Wemo smart outlet feed the cat in the morning so that I don't have to get up. And then I can ask Alexa, was the cat fed? Right? We like that convenience. So organizations are going to start putting these things in business space in addition to commercial space. So think about that implication. Think about when you go to play with your smart thermostat and it demands Bitcoin before it'll change the temperature. What could possibly go wrong, right? Nest thermostats have been known to be vulnerable to a variety of attacks as well. There was also even to how this can go terribly, terribly wrong for us. A case in Finland. Anybody hear about the poor Finns? There was a bunch of residential buildings in Finland that were managed by the Valtia Energy Company. And this is in winter in Finland. That due to a distributed denial of service attack on DNS in general, that attack had a reflected outcome that it took out the thermostats in 4 or 5 residential buildings in Finland and literally turned off the heat in the winter in Finland. Now, fortunately, in that particular case, they were able to respond quickly as incident responders, and they did get the systems up and running again within an hour or so. And I can say, as somebody who's lived in Finland for a few years, the buildings are very well insulated, and so if you only lose heat for an hour, it's not that big of a deal. But if you lose heat for like a day or 2 or 3, then you've got a problem. Imagine the inverse, where if you could, in homes in Phoenix, Arizona, for example, turn on the heat in July and then say, give me 100 Bitcoin before I unlock your thermostat and give you your heating control back so you can turn the AC back on. Now imagine all of that transposed to businesses. We already have building controls in a lot of places, including in this building, that are governed by this same type of technology. How about baby monitors? Rapid7 has a really good research paper out. They did a bunch of work on a variety of baby monitors and found that almost all of them could get remote access via SSH or what? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Telnet. You could telnet to the thing, and these things can then expose that, Russians, they found out about this because some Russian site was offering a whole list of all of these links you could click on to watch all of these random babies on the internet. Do you think that most people that are thinking about their baby are going to think about what that means or how to secure it? So the reason why I bring up baby monitors is not that you'll necessarily see that within a company or an organization where you as an incident responder may need to do forensic acquisition of a baby monitor. My point about the baby monitors is the next one, which is home security. In the home security, you see one of these, the SWAN system, looks an awful lot like systems that a lot of small to medium-sized businesses would also use to provide security for their shop. You see this a lot in the mom and pop shop type space, the SMB space. They're not going to have the financial backing or the financial resources of a Fortune 1000. They're not going to have a commercial building security system such that that is a thing. But they're going to go to Costco and they're going to pick up the SWAN and deploy that instead. But that SWAN system too is a computer at the end of the day. The two on the right, the top one is what a canary normally looks like. The bottom one is what a canary looks like when you take it apart. And that too has storage, CPU, networking, I/O. So the Google Nest Drop Cam, which is in the center, there was a research not too long ago. There was an article, I think it was in Boing Boing in January. They had long Wi-Fi network names or passwords you could send to the Google Nest Drop Cam. Just random long Wi-Fi SSID strings. And you could bombard that camera or those cameras using Bluetooth. And it would cause the camera to either reboot, or if you did it correctly, they found out that you could force it to disconnect from the Wi-Fi it was actually connected to. And then if you continually force-fed it, you could extend the 60 to 90 second window that you gained in your initial attack to actually turning off all the cameras and keep them off for as long as you wanted to rob the place. And they'd have no visual evidence whatsoever that you were there. Your only indicator at that point is that the device was attacked. How are you going to get the forensics off of a Google Nest Drop Cam? You're going to take your encase and your write blocker and plug the drop cam into your acquisition machine? Anybody ever try and call encase and say, hey, I need to acquire a Google Drop Cam? But we're not done with the places in which we want to stick the Internet of Things. Between the canaries and smart locks, which by the way are also vulnerable to hacker tricks, we also want to put things in refrigerators. So this is a Samsung Family Hub refrigerator. This is a refrigerator that can offer to be its own Wi-Fi access point. Imagine like you can't get ice cream because Johnny's Xbox Live gaming session with his friends is sucking up all the bandwidth of the fridge. Right, no, that's not going to happen. Fridge still works as a fridge, obviously, but you notice it's got this beautiful display in it that allows you to do so many things like see the interior of the fridge without opening the door and all that other fun stuff. But do you see the controls that are at the bottom of that panel? Maybe a little hard to make out. What you'll see is that it looks an awful lot like any other Android device. The same home button icon in the middle and everything else. Because the Samsungs are running their Tizen operating system that I already told you previously was insecure in many wild ways, because they took stock Android and they said, oh, we're Samsung, we need to make a purpose-built thing, we need to tweak it and customize it and make it better, and instead they made it horribly, horribly worse. This is one of the #1 participants in the Mirai botnet after DVRs and wireless routers and some of the other things that we've already talked about. Anybody see Samsung refrigerators in break rooms at companies? I have. Everybody likes to have that kind of stuff. It makes the company look cool because they've got the fancy Starbucks machine and they've got the fancy Samsung fridge for their employees to put their snacks in, and they've got their fancy Coke machine that makes every kind of Coke product you could possibly imagine, which is my favorite. I love that machine. So recently, you've probably heard about dishwashers entering the fray as well. In this case, it wasn't just a dishwasher, though. The dishwasher in question for a colossal security failure in that this is prone to a very simple directory traversal attack. // shadow gets you the password file on this dishwasher. So you know you're probably doing something wrong as a manufacturer when your dishwasher has a CVE entry, but this one does. Now everybody was reporting this one. They were all looking at it as, oh, dishwasher, everybody's thinking about the thing under the cupboard in your kitchen that is, where you put your dishes. This is the actual Miele dishwasher in question. And it's not just a dishwasher. It is a dishwasher / disinfection machine that doesn't just wash dishes. It washes laboratory equipment and medical equipment. This is used in hospitals and labs that are dealing with pathogens that need to ensure that the devices that they have, the tools that they put into it to clean are clean from nasty bad bugs and stuff. So what could possibly go wrong with that? Well, if you have a simple directory traversal bug in your machine and you've provided me a web interface and I can get data off of it, especially the password file, which is probably, by the way, the same password file with the same passwords on every other Miele dishwasher, like it in the market. How about I just tweak the programming on it so that instead of the required amount of disinfection agent, I put in only 1/4 of that. Or instead of reaching the mandatory 160 Celsius temperature, I tweak it so that the thermostat says it washed everything at 160 degrees Celsius, but in fact, it only washed it at 40 degrees Celsius. Would you want to be the next patient operated on with the tools that they put in that disinfection machine at that point? Probably not, right? So, all of these things are just among the many things that we need to consider when we're talking about digital forensics and incident response, and how do we acquire the artifacts? How do we triage these systems? And it's a bit of a challenge. I don't have all the answers today. Sorry to say, if you were expecting that I was going to have like some whiz-bang tool that could do all of this, I am going to disappoint you. But it's important to remember what all of these things are at the end of the day. They have CPU. They've got some kind of GPU in some cases, especially anything that deals with video. We have I/O of some kind. We have storage, and we have networking. So what do we have at the end of the day? We have computers. So when you're considering it, remember that a lot of these things, when I went back and said originally that everybody wanted everything cheap and easy except for the security people, well, we go with Android or Linux. I know, okay, technically Android is also Linux, but we'll say Android and Linux. The challenge with these suckers is not the actual operating system or getting the storage copied. The challenge is doing it while the system is still running so that we preserve the order of volatility. And the reason why that's a challenge is because these things are very, very difficult to access. There's usually no physical ports on the medium anymore. They're designed where you press a button and it has Wi-Fi. So you connect your phone to that access point and then tell it, by the way, here's the real Wi-Fi you're supposed to connect to, and it sets itself up and everybody's happy and it's super easy and grandma can even do it and life is good. But that means from an incident response point of view that we are going to have to pollute a lot more because we're going to only at best maybe have remote access to the system if we're lucky. We can try things like, if we could have a port, we could try like a DMA memory attack, for example, using something like the Bash Bunny. Like I said, I'm waiting for mine. I'm hoping to explore that further and continue this research. But we may find that also your other challenge is a political one in that although the device may be critically compromised or maybe not, from the organizational point of view, they're like, yeah, I don't care about that. It's only the blah, 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 whatever the device is. They may not care, but in the meantime, that device is part of, for example, the Mirai botnet, and it's attacking other people. Now that organization has liability issues and civil issues that they have to deal with. Vendors are often very reticent to acknowledge or offer assistance. The number of researchers that have been doing research on how to break these things, because that's the first thing we like to do, right? We all love to break stuff. Every talk, Black Hat, DEF CON, Secure West Virginia, everybody loves the breaking stuff. We're really bad at getting people to do the building stuff. But we at least work in a community where if you're dealing with a Google, a Microsoft, and others, we've got vulnerability disclosure, we've got incident handling guidelines. Melee does not. The researcher actually had a really tough time trying to explain to Melee why their dishwasher disinfection thing had an issue. They didn't care. They had no intention of fixing it. So we have an issue there. I don't have an answer for that one either. So you're also probably thinking, well, but this is all home stuff. You show baby monitors and home security systems and refrigerators and stuff. We work on commercial stuff. We work for businesses, for government and whatnot. But you'd probably be wrong in thinking that because a lot of this stuff exists within the company. Here even we've got these nice sharp TVs here that are showing me my slides. I don't know if these are smart TVs or not, but a lot of places have the smart TVs. Even for things as innocuous as the cafeteria for the company's campus has the fancy Samsung TVs to display the cafeteria menu every day. So they're in the organization, you're just not looking for them. You ignore that as much as you ignore the light for the fire system here in the back of the room, right? It's there, you just tune it out, right? Now, fortunately, there is research underway. I was actually happy when I was doing my research on this topic for the talk that even back in my neck of the woods in Burlington, Vermont, the Leahy Center for Digital Investigation at Champlain College has actually been doing active research into not just IoT security. That's one of the things we got to get away from. Everybody's talking about IoT security. But if you go back to the tenets I told you at the original beginning of the talk, way back almost an hour ago, there's no such thing as a secure system. So we need to now start saying, you know what? We need to not focus as much on trying to make these things more secure, but assume that they're not. And assuming that they're not, how do we fix things and make things better? How do we actually approach investigative aspects of dealing with these things when they are part of a botnet, when they are part of whatever the incident is? There are some other research papers that have been talking about this as well. Digital forensics, the missing piece of the Internet of Things promise. And I provide the URL there. And I have other URLs in my slide notes, which I'm happy to provide as well, that are the background of the different things we're talking about. And then also Internet of Things forensics, challenges and approaches, IEEE. So at least the IEEE started thinking about this as well. So we are at this point now where at least people are starting to take an interest in, as I am, how do we get acquisition of forensics information and incident response stuff from the Internet of Things. So unfortunately I don't have any better answers than that, but I hope maybe next year I could tell you about what I've come up with as I continue my work on the subject to figure this out. So at least start thinking about when you're doing this kind of stuff, what are some of the other things I need to think about beyond the PC, beyond the servers. There's a lot more stuff you need to find out about, even if it means that, yes, okay, fine, the TiVo wasn't involved, the refrigerator wasn't involved, whatever it is. That it's also okay to say that, yeah, that's not part of this, but at least you thought about it and you documented it. Right? So, got like maybe 5 minutes roughly, kind of, sort of. Any questions, Bill?
I went out to a medical vendor probably 4 years ago, and they were doing forensics on medical devices. So there's got to be a way, I guess. It's a matter of vendors stepping up and developers stepping up. But if I'm Ag Forensics or one of the big forensics vendors, this has to be the new market. Or McAfee, you know. So I mean, there's money here, so I'm not sure whether vendors have to step into this space at all.
Yeah. I think there has to be a lot of demonstration that there's enough of this happening where these are needed first before they're willing to put the resources into figuring it out. Which is sort of sad because we're continuing the same cycle of we're going to add security, we're going to add that stuff after the fact rather than trying to build it in to begin with.
You know, I say that, but we're just not getting far from it. How many years have there been computers and cars? A while. So until someone figured out someone making money at it, didn't have a specific piece of commercial software.
Yep. And it's also an open thing for any of you that want to start a new business. Figuring out a way to do that. The good thing is that since a lot of these things are easily hacked, it means you can attack the device to get remote access to it to hopefully acquire the information that way. But anybody else have any questions, comments? If not, I very much thank you for your time. I hope you found it interesting, something to think about, and thanks for having me.